now. Okay, so welcome everyone. Let's talk about chapter 12, letter sound learning. Does anyone have any thoughts or anybody want to talk about some takeaways that they had from that chapter? And then I can confess my gripe with that chapter, but go ahead. Lori, go ahead.
I just felt like it was such a great refresher because I don't deal with letter sounds very often. And so like reading through this, I was marking it all up thinking like when I go to do Great Leaps, I'm going to make sure I have those little notes next to those. But I mean, it's something that comes naturally and automatic, but not like if I'm going to actually sit down and do the sounds, I've got to make sure I'm doing them absolutely correctly. And then when there's two pronunciations, make sure you're giving them both. So anyway, it was a great refresher.
Good.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I had a discussion with a speech pathologist. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And she was saying to me that she has heard some teachers, whether it's foundations or whatever they're using, they might not be pronouncing the letters in isolation correctly. And then when I read this chapter, I was reflecting on myself and I thought, oh, I need to practice and just make sure that I am doing the sounds correctly, because I think with some of those tricky ones that are listed in here, I probably have been mispronouncing and adding like the to the end of it, the UH sound. So it was, I think, good for me to read this and be a little more in tune with that and be thinking about that as I am, using the, the foundations piece with this.
I found myself practicing with their techniques and thinking that's a great little technique.
Mm-hmm. I know Wilson calls it, you need to clip your sounds. So instead of ma, it's or like is the big one. It's like it's like really soft. It's not like a ba. And clipping those sounds as you go through. And it's pretty interesting. And Wilson also, because I think we all have foundations on the computer. If you go into their website, like the foundation's website, you can go through and actually hear all the sounds in isolation. They'll give you examples of how to pronounce them correctly. Just a little.
I was a little confused when they were talking about making the sound for Q or QU, and it said like it's not qua. It sounds like the coo in cuckoo clock. I was a little bit confused by that sound because in foundations we do say qua. Qua. So I didn't know if I say cuckoo clock wrong, and it sounds more. I was just a little confused.
Clock, clock, clock.
Yeah, I don't know. I just read that and was like,
I agree with you. I felt the same way when I read that. I'm like, ooh, I think I've been either doing this wrong or, that's not the sound I'm making.
Yeah, okay. I was sort of baffled by that.
What did you think about that, Anne?
I thought all three were interesting. The Q, there's 3. I'm trying to find that page.
It's 108.
108.
108.
107.
Yeah, the Q, and then I also struggle with the X because the 2 programs that I use, Foundation says it's one sound, and then I'll show you guys this later today. This one breaks it into 2 sounds, and it's like, well, which is right? So I stay with what I'm familiar with. I do say QU qua.
I do too.
Okay.
Qua.
I have switched to my R. I did the OG training last summer, and I used to say for R, but it's more of a R. But you have to cut the schwa off of it. So it takes a lot of practice. I feel like I still don't have it, but
you say qua for QU.
I do because
because that's what foundations, and that's QU would sound.
I
And
can't
I
think of
feel
a
that's what the
single
kids
word
hear.
where QU does not say qua.
What's that?
I can't think of a single word where QU doesn't say qua. Qua,
Right.
quiet, like then the I, right? Qua, in. Like if you were going to do the onset rhyme, it would be qua, in,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Qua, in.
That's why I stuck with it, because it's really what the kids are hearing. And in our
Right.
dialect and our what's the word? The way we the way we speak in the Northeast,
Yeah.
we're saying qua. So,
What I found the same thing with the R, and I don't know why, but at the time that I learned it, Katy Perry's Roar song was really big. So I always say that to kids. I was like, think of Katy Perry's Roar. It's not that's ER. It's roar, like Katy Perry Roar.
That's
I
awesome.
like that. I'll use that.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I took, anyone else want to talk about that before I talk about my gripes with this chapter?
I thought these vision of how to present them. Like it made sense to me.
Yeah.
To like, present them in, well, it's like present them in a developmentally appropriate manner, and then the next present them with, the ones that are visually similar. Like, it seemed like there was a lot of different things going on there. But anyway, I think every program has its own sort of developmentally appropriate manner.
Mhm.
So I think that makes it hard.
I agree. I completely disagreed with him it was on page 102. And maybe that's just because I finished that Wilson stuff and I'm totally drinking the Kool-Aid and I'm into it. So I struggle with level 3. He's like, you don't need to have that syllable types and knowing that stuff, but I feel like kids that have disabilities in this, and I also think kids that need to become good spellers, it's helpful to know those syllable types and understanding how words are put together in the English language. And that's where he was like, oh, it's unnecessary. And I feel like that's a detriment. Like we need to be teaching those kind of skills even later as they progress in the grades. I feel like that's what some kids are lacking, is understanding how words work. And that's just my own opinion. I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but I was like, I kind of took issue with that at the bottom of page 2. I was like, I disagree. But I don't know how Erica or Anne or Lori or how you guys would feel about that.
I keep going back. I hate this about any book that I read, but I keep going back and be like, they're selling themselves,
True.
Mhm.
right? So their whole goal is to negate something else to make their program or their idea better.
Right.
So at the end of the day, this wasn't, yes, the last part is she wrote it because she's seen kids struggle, but she's also selling something. And so it always feels like that. Like, why can't we just create a program that's best for kids and we all use that? Instead, we have to be sold this because it's better than this, or,
True.
I don't know.
And I guess I had that underlined too, Michelle. I didn't take it as we shouldn't do the syllables, but more of he was trying to strengthen the importance of the phonemic awareness
Okay.
component to building that up. Because like Erica said, I feel like I have 3 different programs that I use, phonemic awareness being this one, and I take a little bit from each. What I took from reading this book is that I should be going deep into phonemic awareness.
Right.
But the other piece I just wanted to go back to with the letter sound bit, I thought it was interesting when he was saying you don't necessarily need to have to attach a word to the letter name. And I think it's important to do the picture, like, the snake for the S, but giving them the word actually, and I learned this in Wilson too, that it triggers their brain to give them the sound. So they're not going through all the letters of the name of their alphabet. So when you are doing the letters, I strongly suggest as many words with that sound. Like give it, don't not have that keyword. I kind of took what you shouldn't have a keyword, and I was like, no, we need the keyword.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I underlined on page 102, Michelle, I think it's sort of right before where you were reading, but it said, you know, for struggling readers, the missing element is almost always phoneme proficiency. So, I mean, I think they're stressing that, and that for me, you know, was a good reminder too, because at second grade, and especially I think this year, because of the circumstances, we're going to need to kind of take a step back and start with, you know, the basics. So even though it's beginning of second grade, it's really more like the middle of first grade or the kids I work with.
Agreed, definitely. All right, let's move on to chapter 13, addressing compensating students. Wanted to see what you thought about that.
Well, I'll talk on the idea of, I briefly said it before everybody was on, but just when kids are so excited to come in and learn, and then when they start to hit those roadblocks, you start to see the shutdown, the behaviors. And when you see it like a true learning disability, I would not wish upon any of my worst enemies. I mean, it's so hard to watch that. But when they get to the high school, it's some of those like true disabilities, they are so done. Like, why should I even bother? So hearing the message of it's so important at the very early stages to make sure that those kids have this awareness it was like, yep, you're right. Like, I totally need to put more emphasis on that. I think a lot of times at my grade level, we're trying to now give, you know, assistive technology to help them feel like they're in that playing field, but I need to help them even more so that they get as much as they possibly can with the phonemic awareness before they get out of middle school.
And just to tie, I don't want to go on a tangent on that, Lori, but I totally agree. And I know I missed last week, but I watched it last night just talking about the past assessment. And I think that's where it's crucial in K2 to figure out a way, teachers, reading specialists, myself included, a way to administer that, to really figure out who has those weaknesses so we don't create the compensator.
Yeah.
Because I really do, our standards are so high that we are creating compensators because we're pushing these kids faster than they're ready. So
What did you guys?
I'll add to that. I made a note here too, just about the idea of, it made me rethink, and I think it might have been in this book, but it might have been a different one I read recently, just to change the idea of screening in the sense of making sure we really look at all students, because a lot of times, you know, you may not, and I'm excited that I'm going to be working with everyone and that I have that opportunity to be able to help everyone in that area, because I know as a classroom teacher it can be difficult, like truly speaking, if there's a student that seems like, oh, they're getting, know what's going on, it's easier to be like, oh, I'm not as worried about them. I only have the ability to test, let's say 5 on the pass. I'm not going to pick like Joey because he seems like okay. So I think it's really awesome that we'll have the opportunity to hopefully be able to administer this, to screen everyone.
I just wanted to add, I liked what you said, Lori, with regard to revisiting phonemic awareness with students of the ages you teach, because I feel too often when they're at your level, the assistive technology is just too tempting, and they get into spell check and they get into all of that. And so I feel that they don't write like they should be able to write on their own. They're relying on the technology to do their writing for them. And I think if they have a better phonemic awareness, they'll see themselves as writers without that crutch. I mean, assistive technology is great, but I think we've been doing a disservice to a number of students by relying on spell check all the time and so forth. So I think if we raise the awareness at every grade level throughout K through 8, you know, we
I agree, and I think that we have so many, not even my population, all population, everybody's relying on autocorrect on their cell phone, you know, they're talking, everything. So it's for everyone, totally. And then I have such a hard, like thinking about putting those kids that struggle on the same playing field. Like there's so many times where you're like, okay, we've got to do this with technology because there's no way they'll be able to get what they need to get done within that time frame. So it's always a battle of when do we do it, and we do use, like we have, we've used Mac Scholar. Like I've had kids go through all that. We've done Great Leaps, and it's so mundane for them at that age level. They're like, really, I'm doing this? Like I'm making these sounds, and it's like, if not, it's just so hard to watch that kid know that they're at that level. And that's the challenge that I have internally to, you know, but I think it's just making all students aware that they don't have it 100% with automaticity anymore, because like the idea of saying, teach the kids the letter sounds in cursive, like our kids don't even know how to cursive anymore. They can't read cursive, you know? So everything, anyway, it's hard.
Do you think we've let go a little bit? And I'm not knocking intermediate grades, but I'm wondering, you know, of course, primary grades, we are teaching the children. They either come to us in first grade reading, or we're teaching them to read, become better readers. I'm wondering if you just naturally, you lighten up with that in 3, 4, 5 with phonemic awareness.
I
and so
hear
forth.
Erica all the time doing it in her classroom, so I don't know what the other regular ed teachers are doing, but I definitely, I mean, Erica's hammering them with that.
Fourth grade has really struggled with the spelling program that came from Wonders. And they've been trying a variety of different things. They did Words Their Way, and they did a lot of word source, which I think were great and helpful, and they could do them at a variety of levels, but kids didn't have the ability to even sort the words when we started it. Like they didn't know that, they really didn't have a sense. And this was the fourth grade, so this was not the group who had foundations, but they didn't know long and short vowels. They didn't know them by name. You know, they knew that they existed, but they didn't know them by name enough to appropriately sort and O.
That Wonders spelling program is
Terrible.
it's terrible.
And we've really kind of done a disservice by
That's
using
why I
that
was
all
so
this
happy
time.
when we picked up Foundations, because we just let go of Wonders spelling. Foundations really builds upon, now maybe Christine, you could speak to this in third grade, like, is there does Foundations go on or transform into a Wilson approach in the intermediate grades?
No, not at all. In fact, I think, and Anna can maybe speak to this more, but Campton started doing Foundations in third grade because of that. We don't do it in third grade at Plymouth, but it was something that we had kind of talked about, you know, because they were using it, and I think it could really be helpful.
Yeah, so at our school, Campton started Foundations in third grade last year, and that was because those kids had started it in first grade, so they didn't want to just like start everyone like the first year. They wanted them to have a couple of years experience before they started doing it. And I believe that's the intent now, that we'll have Foundations in all of our K-3 classrooms.
And watching
Fourth grade, I think fourth grade is gonna revisit a lot of third grade Foundations because of everything that happened last year.
Yeah, we just got the call to have them bring in their Foundations books here because they
I was like, get it out of the recycling bin.
don't throw them away. Right.
Do you, Christine, do you have a third grade Foundations kit? I know this is off on a tangent, I apologize. I'll
We
get back to it.
don't know.
No, they didn't. What are the? Was it just the grant was K2?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it was only K2 that Ethel got that grant, right?
I don't know.
Because they didn't go with us to that workshop when we went to Vermont.
No.
It was just K through
It's
2.
K2.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I wasn't sure. Huh, that might be something that we want to visit later down the road. Okay, getting back to the book, because I could go on about that for hours. Chapter 14, remediation, learning disabilities, dyslexia, and response to intervention. I felt like this was a nice summary and kind of, what we need to be focusing on and all that good stuff. Does anybody have any takeaways that they want to talk about?
There's one thing that I really liked that I noted down and I flagged, and I want to say it was like 120 to 121, but just the idea of not labeling kids as reading disabled, but rather like you have a weakness in a specific area, I think is really important. Like obviously for us identifying the source of the reading difficulty, but when someone's labeled, obviously like we know how damaging it can be. So I think that's just, I want to say there was a continuum. Yeah, on 120 they like a line graph type of idea, whatever you want to call it, chart type of thing for the skills for that continuum. And I think that's just really important to think about.
I just feel like the information is very important to be aware of and be able to communicate in a succinct way, because I cannot say the number of times I have heard from parents and teachers, not teachers, but parents, and in just other settings where people have a misconception that he explained about dyslexia. I have someone in my family very close to us who has it. So I had an interesting discussion about how other people perceive this. And so I think it's helpful not to promote the myth, and that's something we can dispel, because I can't even, when I taught first grade, the number of parents that came up to me and said, I think my child might be dyslexic, they keep switching their B's and D's. I mean, it's like all the time.
I liked the on 118 I had underlined that there are not poor readers because they are reversals and transpositions are a side effect of continuing to be at the earliest stages of reading development. So even when they're doing it later, their reading development is still back there. But
Right.
I do think, there are so many forms of what we classify right now as dyslexia that I don't think that we can say every one of them falls under this mystique. I mean, there are definitely some kids who have an eye issue going on that drags and moves the letters. Like, some of this is definitely medical and reason besides just not knowing your phonemic awareness, I think.
Did anybody else have any takeaways that they wanted to bring up about this chapter?
I loved the RTI conversation because so many times, like, teachers will put some investment into that kid. Like, I'm just going to give Jen Deloge as an example. She's so good at seeing where their weaknesses are, and when she does that response to intervention, the kids get excited, she gets excited, and they start to see gains. And the idea is that's what every one of those tier 2 kids needs prior to pushing them into an IEP, But I've just seen the excitement of seeing the kids and the teacher become very, excited that the fact that the kids are feeling more confident when skills are taught to them at their level. It's just a little plug for Jen.
Jen is fantastic.
I remember this is only pertaining to Plymouth, but when we had Fran and Kyla come over, I think one of our biggest teachers' input was, we need support with knowing RTI. That was, I think, one that we talked about. So I'm so excited for Sarah to come in, help. Yay.
Yay.
Yay. I know, we're all excited about Sarah. Awesome. Anyone have any key takeaway, like I don't want to move too quickly through this chapter, but anyone just want to talk about the book in its entirety? What was your key takeaway, or what are you, thinking about using into your classroom? And how do you think you're going to go about that? Yeah,
I love, I'm going to use the word wall, and I already made like exactly what they have. I don't have the page in front of me, but the vowels and then the words. I really like that. I like the idea of just maybe even having somewhere where when they're lined up, using the pointer and just kind of reiterating those sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And then the flashcards where the E and the D, where there's both of those. Again, just kind of like fitting those in somewhere throughout the day. I already made them. I was excited.
That's awesome. Anyone else want to talk about how they might use it, or?
I think the book itself will be my new cookbook. I'll be referring to this a lot when I am teaching reading. And, just those quick 1 minute, those 1 minute studies with words as I see them in the reading with the children, that's what I hope to begin implementing.
I
Yeah,
think
that's what I was going to say too, like those 1 minute activities, I feel like will be easy to include with like alongside the other programs that we're expected to use in our classrooms. And sometimes when you like read a book or attend a class or you get a new program, it's a little bit overwhelming to be like, oh my gosh, how am I going to fit this all in? But I feel like those 1 minute activities are a reasonable request. Like that's something that I can start doing right away, and it's not going to be taking away significant chunks of time from the other things that I'm expected to teach.
I think I can use them as exit tickets or transitions during the daily 5. So I'm just thinking about how to organize. I'm hoping to administer the past. I'm thinking about how I'm going to do that, and then how I'm going to organize and copy pages. So I'm hopefully targeting the level that they're at.
And I liked in the book how he did, even if we're not able to administer the past to every student, kind of we could figure it out a little bit on our own just by going into a lower level, and then if they're getting it, then progressing. And so it's not so daunting, I guess, or where it's hard for us to get started. It's like, oh, I got to give the pass before I even start it. I think you can kind of finagle with it a little bit. Does everybody think that, or do you think how do you guys feel about that? I kind of took away from it.
Yeah, I definitely saw the informal way of doing it. I have a small class, and I've been practicing on my boys, as I know other people have been practicing on their kids. Anna, I will have Pip assessed. Anna has my son. But I'm just very curious where they're going to be. These kids could be all over the map. I have no idea. So part of me wants to do the formal assessment or the informal assessment. But at a minimum, I think just being able to do a few of them is helpful to gauge where they are.
Definitely. Anyone else want to talk about takeaways?
This is sort of unrelated to the book, but whenever like we get together like primary teachers across like the SAU, I'm just always so fondly reminded that like it's such a helpful experience, and we really don't do it enough, because I think we have so much to share with each other, and it's just nice to hear what other people are doing. And I don't know, I really like these kinds of things.
I definitely appreciated it. It got me through my reading. Because I don't know if I could have done that by myself. Yeah, Anne, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say just about the past, a couple things on that, because I've given it quite a bit. Don't be afraid to do it in chunks. Like I've had to take 2 days to give it to a student just because of timing. I didn't want to spend too much. I didn't want to take my whole 30 minutes just to give the past. So
Right.
you can chunk it. And I'd also suggest when we are able to do small groups, it's a great way to start that reading group
Mhm.
because you're going to be surprised. The kids love it. I'll just warn you, like it says 1 minute. You can play these. You can go on and be like, oh shoot, it's 10 minutes into my group. I put a timer on for myself just to make sure I stick with the plan because they're just like, oh, one more. Kids really, really enjoy these. Even the kids who struggle, because if you just build up their confidence, give them the ones they know, then give them a tricky one and then go back, you'll find that they can be super fun. So, my 2 cents.
I agree. And then they start to it sort of becomes a chant, and I found that they like that rhythm of the chant. Can you see me or hear me?
I was just trying to figure out who was talking.
Hi.
You're frozen, but it's you, Angela. I got you. We could hear you.
Oh my God.
It's like,
Yeah.
who's talking?
Okay. Lovely. Okay, great. Yeah. That's my life.
Well, the time is 9:06,
All right.
so I want to.
Moving on.
The time is 9:06, and I just wanted to end here. I just wanted to thank everybody again for doing this with me because it was super helpful to me. And I agree with Anna. I think it's important that we have these conversations and learn from each other because we're our best professional development resources. In my opinion, I've always thought that everybody is. There are so many great resources right next door to your classroom. So it's just my opinion. But I just wanted to thank you. Thank you all. And have
Thank you, Michelle, for facilitating this.
Yes, thank you.
that's been fun.